Hi, I'm Sam Harrison and I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today we have a discussion with my fellow 2023 booktubers. I asked as many fantasy and science fiction reading booktubers as I could find that started their channels in 2023 if they'd be able to provide me a short clip which had their favourite either science fiction or fantasy read of 2023. So without further ado, let me introduce my fellow booktubers.
Sam Harrison, my man. Let me see. What did you say in your email? 1 to 2 minute video. What my favorite science fiction or fantasy read of this year is. Sam, that is really hard. I'm going to answer 2 of them. I'm going to answer both. For science fiction, that is a no-brainer. That is Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. Golden Sun, to me, is like the quintessential Red Rising novel. It was the book that made me a Red Rising fan. There's just something about Pierce Brown's dystopian science fiction setting and the protagonist Darrow and everything that he's doing, especially in this book, that has me in awe. Like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read that was based in space. Just so good. And of all the Red Rising novels, this is the one that I come back to the most. This is the one that I have the most fond memories with, the most heartache with, just everything about it. If I had to pick my favorite fantasy read in 2023, that would totally be, if I can reach it, hands down, that is Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. A lot of people don't consider Stephen King's The Dark Tower series fantasy, but they should. They need to, because this is some of the most out there stuff by Stephen King. It's so imaginative. It's so creative in every sense of the word, and it beats out anything that I've really ever read in a series, like ever. You have so many things combining to make this story great, and Wizard and Glass is my favorite Dark Tower novel, and this novel is so pivotal for the entire series. And this was such a beautiful love story, tragic love story, so well written, so well done. It is a chunky, fat behemoth of a book, but it is perfect all the way through. I love this so much. So I'm thinking this has to be my favorite fantasy read of 2023. Yeah. So Sam, thanks for having me on. Thank you so much for having me on. I cannot wait to work with you again in the future. Keep in touch.
Hello, my name is Matt from baskinthestory, and Sam has asked me to tell you what my favourite 2023 sci-fi or fantasy read was. And I struggle with this, I must admit, because I've read some absolute fantastic books this year, but I've settled on a character-driven sci-fi story, which I adore. It's absolutely superb, and even though it's character-driven and not, hard classic hard sci-fi, it still has big ideas and it still has loads of science, but told in such an entertaining and engaging way that you just can't help but just flow along with the story as it gathers pace. This book also has, I would argue, one of the greatest friendships in any sci-fi novel ever written. So, what is this book? It is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is superb, and one thing I will say is I would recommend listening to the audiobook to this story, because it does add a superb extra dimension. The narrator is Ray Porter, and he is an amazing narrator, but this book is elevated by his narration. I'm not going to tell you a huge amount about the plot, because the more you learn from actually engaging with the story, the better. And if you know Andy Weir, you may well know The Martian, which was made into a Matt Damon film, but Project Hail Mary takes a more ambitious storyline, I'm going to say. It's a bit of bigger scope, and it's maybe stretching the bounds of credibility more, but my goodness does it drive you on, and my goodness does it engage you. And just the friendship that is built and the relationship that characters have in this is superb. The science is fun and entertaining and engaging, and I can't recommend this highly enough. So pick up Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary.
Hi, I'm Brian Bell, and the channel that I'm on is called BellTube. Sam, thanks for asking me to do this today. The best fantasy book I read in 2023 was, without a doubt, Swan Song by Robert McCammon. Now, this is a post-apocalyptic adventure, but it's leaning more a little bit into fantasy than it is into sci-fi. Sure, the bombs have gone off, Russia and the United States. I believe it's set kind of a little bit back in the 1980s, but the bombs have gone off, and the planet is a mess. So what we're finding is that people who are generally good-natured are out there helping people in this post-apocalyptic world. The people that are not very good-natured are doing the exact opposite, and they're taking advantage of absolutely everything and creating murder and chaos along the way. There's a real soft magic system to it, but there is one there. Robert McCammon's Swan Song is absolutely a highly recommended book, and it was the best book in the fantasy genre that I read in 2023. I hope everybody checks it out. Thanks a lot, Sam, for having me on here. Hope to talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Cam here from the NerdBookReview YouTube channel. Sam, thanks for including me in this video. Each year, about 2/3 of the books that I read come from the indie world, and my favorite book of 2023 comes from there as well. Daughter of the Beast by E.C. Greaves is a SPIFBO finalist. If you're not sure what the SPIFBO competition is, SPFBO, look it up. The reason that Daughter of the Beast really jumped out to me this year was that it includes no humans at all. I think that was just something that was just a great choice. It is based on a Slavic fairy tale. It includes hobgoblins as the dominant race on this world. Think like 6 foot tall, Dungeons and Dragons style. The Fae is what our main character Untitled comes from. She is about 5 feet tall. And the people who are not quite sure if they're the good guys or the bad guys are the Volcarii. They're 7 foot tall wolf women. The leader of the Volcarii thinks that Untitled is the key to saving their race from the two empires who are both run by hobgoblins and don't particularly care for the Volcarii. Volcarii are not exactly civilized. They are raiders and pillagers, and both sides would kind of like to wipe them out. Well, a prophecy told the leader of the Volcarii that Zentil, that 5 foot tall Fae, is somehow the key to saving the Volcarii people. So right off the bat in the book, we have a raid where the Volcarii viciously attack the village that Zentil lives in and kidnap her, and from there the story will really unfold. I think that having no humans at all was a real positive in this story because it allows you not to have a bias for one side or another. If one of the two empires had been human and the Volcarii had been their antagonist, I think it'd always be a little bit harder not to have some sort of bias. But having no humans at all just made it absolutely wonderful for me, and I think that's what tipped it over a couple of other books as being my favorite book of the year. I hope you all had a wonderful reading time in 2023, and I hope the year 2024 is even better.
Hello folks, my name is Usman, and this channel is called Bards and Books. Now, I am a member of the 2023 class of booktubers, you could say, along with many other awesome people. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm fairly new to reading. I primarily enjoy fantasy with some sci-fi thrown in, maybe some historical fiction every now and then. I just got back into reading maybe a couple years ago. I haven't read a whole ton, but I am finding that my taste leans toward the darker side of fantasy, and definitely grimdark as well. That's what I've just been enjoying a lot of lately, so a lot of grimdark and dark fantasy series. I do read many other stuff. You know, Discworld is one of my favorites. I enjoy the comedy and the humor, the satire, that sort of thing. But definitely with the darker elements. So, if you ask me what my favorite series is that I read in 2023, that would be the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Remarkable character work. I'm mainly a character-driven reader, so this series worked really well for me, but it's got everything. It's got awesome pacing, very good plotting, the prose is beautiful, the world building leaves you itching for more, so definitely the First Law Trilogy is my favorite that I read in 2023. And more to come on the channel, a lot more grimdark and dark fantasy reads. I'm in the middle of Malazan right now. Got to get to a lot more. There's a lot more to get to. So that's just a little bit about me and this channel and my favorite read of 2023.
Hey, this is Matt from Go Read Books. Sam invited me on to talk about my favorite sci-fi or fantasy book from this year, from 2023. I'm proud to be a part of what's coming to be known as the class of 2023 among booktubers. So what I wanted to do is talk about both my favorite sci-fi book, and my favorite fantasy book of this year, because it's hard to just talk about one. So for sci-fi, it is Lightbringer by Pierce Brown. Now, I just started this series in January of this year with the first book, Red Rising, and then each month I read another book, and then when released in January, the end of January. I think I may have read it the 1st of August. I read it then, and it was amazing. As far as I'm concerned, now there's different opinions on this, but the best of the Red Rising novels. It was amazing. The penultimate book, we're waiting on Red God. Have no idea when it's going to come out, but I enjoyed Lightbringer. A lot of good action. And for fantasy, it is the best of fantasy himself, Philip Chase, The Return to Edan. This is the third book and final book of the Edan trilogy, and just an immersive world, fully realized characters. I absolutely give it 5 stars. A wonderful, wonderful read, and these are my favorite sci-fi and fantasy books of 2023.
Hi, Fantasy Awash here, talking about my favorite book from 2023. It was too hard for me to pick just one book, so I'm going with one of my top 5 books of the year, and that was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I'm a big advocate that we need more standalones in fantasy. Brandon has said that this is going to be something that is going to have a sequel later, and it is technically part of the Cosmere, but you could read this and not read anything else by Brandon Sanderson and still enjoy it immensely because it is a super, super fun book and a great read. If you hear any noise, it's my cat, which is typical for my videos. Warbreaker is a really great story that is 2 cities on the brink of war. The main POVs are 2 sisters, and there's 2 magic systems and 2 religions in this book. It is really engaging. I loved some of the characters in this story. It had 2 of my favorite characters from the entire Cosmere. This is the book that I think Brandon Sanderson hits all the right notes for in terms of humor. I don't think that there's any book that his humor is better. Lightsong in this is 10 out of 10. Nightblood is 10 out of 10. Cannot say enough good things. He also did a switcheroo on me in this book that I hated one of the characters until about 2/3 through the book and then grew to really like this character. So if you're looking for a book that might surprise you, is fun, fantasy, magic-based, hard magic-based, and you haven't read Warbreaker, you should definitely try Warbreaker. See you next time.
Hey Sam.
Hey Sam.
Thank you so much for inviting us onto your Class of 2023 video. We are Hardy's Books.
My name's Laura.
My name is Ross.
So Ross, what was your favourite book?
Oh, okay, yes, my favourite book. I was prepared. My favourite book that I read this year was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. You know, it's been hanging around for a little while now, and I finally got around to reading it. This book stood out just far beyond the pack of how written for me it was. Susanna Clarke does this kind of gothic horror thing in that she actually kind of embodies the writers from the era, like really embodies their tone, their prose, and it all comes together to create the most incredible 1,000-page plus tome with a stupendously good story, brilliant characters, such imaginative soft magic world building stuff.
As aspiring writers, this is the kind of book that you read and feel very deflated that your writing will never be this good.
It's not going to be for everyone, but if it is for you, it will be so much for you. Laura, why don't you tell us what your favourite book of 2023 was?
So, my favourite book that I read this year was very different to Ross's, in a completely different vein. So mine is this lovely little sci-fi book called Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. Emily St. John Mandel is most famous for Station 11, which is one of my favourite books of all time. It is set over 4 different timelines, one in the early 20th century, one in the 21st, and then 2 in the near future and 1 in the more distant future. It touches on some really interesting themes. We're talking about like simulation hypothesis. It's just so clever, beautifully written, as everything that Emily St. John Mandel has ever written is. And I absolutely devoured it. I read it in one sitting. If you haven't got on the Emily St. John Mandel wagon yet, I highly recommend that you do.
On the Mandel wagon.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
Make it yourself.
You find it.
My name is John Minton. This is Talking Story. And Sam, thank you so much. It is such a privilege to be included in the Class of 2023 Booktubers here on YouTube. My favorite book of the year, my favorite read of the year, I gotta go Lightbringer. It was everything I wanted in the penultimate edition of this amazing series. You've got nonstop action. You've got a slowdown in that action for some character moments as our main protagonist Daryl looks back over his past experience and mistakes and comes to terms with them and gets comfortable in his own skin, kind of goes on a spiritual journey so he's girded up and ready for everything that's coming his way. In the final book of this series, I absolutely loved everything about this book, and that is why it is my favorite read of the year. But I have to say, I'm 300 pages away from finishing Words of Radiance, my last book, my last read of the year, coming around the outside, could take the title. I haven't even weathered the Sanderlanche at the end of this book, and already it is a masterclass in world building, and I am loving the journey with these characters. So you'll just have to check back with me on Talking Story if you want to see what came out ahead. My top 10 list will go up probably very quickly after the new year. Thanks so much for including me, Sam. Best wishes, my friend.
Hey, Sam, and hey, everyone. Chris here from the channel Christopher Navo. I read some amazing books in 2023. And so when I'm compiling my top 10 reads, I don't put them in any sort of ranking order. So from pulling from that list, the recommendation I have for you guys today is Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. This is book 1 of the Mortal Techniques series. Now, you can read any of these books as a standalone and in any particular order. However, I do recommend you start with Never Die. Just in this 270-page book, Rob paints this picturesque, Asian-inspired world, but heavily influenced by the Japanese culture. The highlight of this book is most definitely the characters. They are fun, engaging, easy to follow, and there's this motley crew. So if you love that kind of story, that is there. There's plenty of Eastern martial arts and action with that manga-style execution that we all love. You add in some mythical creatures, and finally, a plot of that unforgettable quest. Rob's prose is very fluid. His pacing is nice, quick, and steady, and I was able to read this in just a couple sittings. I highly recommend Never Die and its follow-up, Pawn's Gambit. I have not read the last book, Spirits of Vengeance, but I plan to read that in 2024. But in the meantime, guys, again, highly recommend Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. Happy reading. Thank you for having me on, Sam, and cheers.
So while I'm here, I thought I would give you my favourite fantasy and science fiction book of 2023, which if you are watching, or have been watching the channel, you'll know was Of War and Ruin by Ryan Cahill. Ryan's books have completely taken me by surprise this year. I've never been a big Dragon Rider fantasy guy. I've never been a big kind of classic fantasy, you know, like dwarves and elves and all that sort of jazz. I've been much more interested in this kind of modern version of fantasy like we see from people like Brandon Sanderson. However, Ryan's books completely and utterly overtook my reading life. I read them all the way through, back to front, like binged them, and had a fantastic time. And actually, reading Ryan's books was one of the main impetuses behind me starting this channel, because I just wanted to talk to so many more people about how good these books were. Of War and Ruin is the third book in a 5-book series, so there's really nothing I can tell you about the plot without spoiling the first 1-2 books and 2 novellas. However, I would just say pick up Of Blood and Fire, which is the first book in the series, and do read that. It's absolutely fantastic, and I think that you will love it.
Yo guys, welcome back. Today, as you guys can see, I'm not on the normal channel. My boy Sam has invited me to do the Booktube class of 2023's best books of the year. Not necessarily stuff that came out this year, but just our best and favorite reads from the year of 2023, our cohort class, if you will. So yeah, that's what I'm here to do today. I am the TheDragonbornReviewer. You can call me Luke. And without further ado, let's get into it. And before we do, thank you, Sam, for having me on. So my absolute favorite read of this entire year is really a no-brainer for me. There were quite a few that I read that when I read them, I thought that this was like the best thing ever. Of course, I did some major finishing series this year. I read all of Saxon Tales, finished that, which is my favorite series of all time, but no single book that I read from that series this year could top this one. and that is going to have to be The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Towards the end of the year, I did start my journey with the Stormlight Archive, and this year I also started reading Brandon Sanderson in general. And this book right here is just awesome. I love almost everything about it. It's definitely a bit of a slow burn, but it's just awesome. The amount of world building and intricacy with that world building and the characters. I've never seen characters that felt so fleshed out before, especially with like Dalinar and Kaladin. Those are some of the most human characters that I've ever seen in literature. Excellent work by Brandon Sanderson here, and I've heard that this is probably the weakest book in the series, so I'm definitely extremely excited to tackle the rest of the series in 2024 and hopefully get caught up by the time Wind and Truth is released, because I would love to hop on that and read it when everybody else is, and then be a part of the, you know, the community as at the same time as everyone else, if that makes sense. I think that would be really cool, so that's going to be my big challenge for next year. And once again, thank you for having me on, Sam. Peace.
Guys, my name is Dan. My channel's name is The Black and Blue Collar Reader. Sam asked me to come on and tell you guys what my favorite book of 2023 is. And man, I've got it narrowed down to about 3, and I just can't make up my mind. So I'm going to give you all 3. And you could probably guess what the winner is if you've seen any of my channel or my stuff lately, because there's one book on this list that I've been singing praises of. So let's get to the first book. It's going to have to be Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Slice of life book about a father and son who takes on an evil carnival. It is beautifully written, it's dark, and it is just, it's a heartwarming story with some amazing themes about fathers and sons and wanting to grow up and wanting to be young again. It was just an amazing book. The next book is probably has 2 of the most compelling characters I've ever met inside a fantasy book, and that's going to be The White Luck Warrior by R. Scott Baker. There's 2 characters in this that just blew my mind. One of our old POV's sons in Relatus, as well as Cleric. He is a non-man who is immortal, and he is just a fascinating and deep character that that we got more of in this story. And we also got, finally, we got in Relatus in this story, and I think Baker knocked it out of the park with these 2 characters in this book. Also, this is probably the front runner here. I don't think it's going to be a shock to anybody, but The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez is probably going to be my book of the year right here. Beautifully written. This author took a lot of chances, and I mean, he stuck the landing in my opinion. 10.0s across the board. So if you haven't read The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, here's your chance, because I'm starting to read along on my Discord. Come by, check me out. Sam, again, man, thanks for having me on this channel, and I hope you guys pick up some of these books that I suggested that may be my top book of the year. Thanks for having me again, Sam. Bye.
Hi, my name's Tim. First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to Sam for inviting me to talk about my favourite book. So my favourite science fiction or fantasy book this year is In the Shadow of the Wolf Queen by Kieran Millward Hargrave. This is the first in the Geomancer trilogy. First thing I love about this is that it's absolutely gorgeous. Look at that. Love that. And the next thing I love about it is the magic system. So the magic system is all based off of nature. So you have listeners who can hear trees, you have dowsers who can find water, and you have people that can cause earthquakes. It's all nature based, and the magic seeps through into everything, but it's not world breaking. I really like that. The main character, Isolde, has no magic. Her sister does, but she doesn't, and she ends up on a quest to try and find her sister, and she ends up working with someone called the Wolf Queen. So the second thing I love about this book is the Wolf Queen as a character is
an invading nation. But what she does is she renames herself whenever she comes to a new land with a name from that land. So this land is based off the British Isles, but it's all kind of old school fantasy. So there's the map, there's the UK. And so the Wolf Queen takes the name of Seren, which is an old Welsh name. And what the Wolf Queen does is she picks and chooses from different cultures from each one that she invades to create her own culture. So a country that has been invaded still keeps some of their traditions, so they feel better about basically being invaded. And so I think this is a really interesting look at the physical geography side of trees and mountains and lakes, and the human geography side of society, picking and choosing the stuff that they want throughout their history. The story is great. The characters are really good, really interesting, complex, and the best thing, one of the best things about this is the prose. Kieran has always been a tremendous writer, and this is just knocks it out of the park from a prose perspective. It's lyrical but clear. It's purposeful but purple. Like it's really, really good. So it's only got like 140 ratings on Goodreads, which is insane because this book is not just a 5-star book. This is like a 6-star book. This is so good. So yeah, In the Shadow of the Wolf Queen by Kieran Millward Hargrave. That's my #1 book of the year. Anyway, thanks. Get out of my house.
So I hope your TBR hasn't been too broken by watching this video. In getting these clips, I've had some fantastic conversations with my fellow 2023 booktubers, and if you don't subscribe to their channels, then I would at least recommend that you give them a try. Now, if you liked this video, then, well, I don't know when the next one that's like this will be, but if you liked this video, please like it. If you want to have a chat with me about any of the books that were in this video, or if you want to chat with any of the other booktubers, then you can, at their channel names, drop down in the comments and let's talk about the books that you want to read. And if you'd like to see more content from me, then please subscribe to the channel. I would love to have you as part of the community. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.